Today on the Ag Issues program, this is going to be a lot of fun to talk about. We talked about this back in early March. It is the Radicle Corn Value Chain Challenge. And one of the people we talked to about that is Connie Fisher, who is joining us on the program. She is the Director of Innovation and Commercialization with Kansas Corn, as she joins us on the program this morning. Connie, good morning.
Good morning. How are you today, Greg?
I am good. How are you?
Good.
Well, we talked about Radicle Corn Value Challenge, and we're also going to talk about that with Neil Gutterson, who is the partner and CTO with Radicle, as he joins us as well. Neil, good morning to you.
Good morning, Greg. Glad to be here.
And the third person we're going to talk to is Dr. Chris Nicholas, who is president and co-founder of Radicle Technologies. And we're going to explain a little bit why Radicle Technologies is joining us. Well, due in part because they were one of the winners of the Innovation Challenge and investment by Radicle as well. Dr. Nicholas, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Connie, I'm going to start with you. And when you and I first had this conversation back in Houston at the Commodity Classic, just remind people, how is Kansas Corn's participation in Radicle different than other new use projects that the commission has worked on?
So I think, Greg, to understand how this new uses project for the commission is different, it's important to understand what the Radicle Corn Value Chain Challenge is, just so we can refresh our memory from back in March. You know, the challenge is a collaboration of 9 state corn groups like the Kansas Corn Commission and Radicle Growth. And so what we did is we set out to invest a minimum of $1.5 million in startup and growth companies worldwide, whose innovative technologies and business models will create new uses for corn and create long-term demand for corn production. You know, in essence, that's what we're all about at the Corn Commission. You know, like you said, we kicked off the challenge at the Commodity Classic back in March, and that's when Radicle started accepting applications from across the globe for those types of new technologies utilizing corn. So in total, they received 132 applications or companies that wanted to compete in the challenge, and 41% of those were from outside of the U.S. The Radicle team then conducted over the next 6 months due diligence on those companies, and which culminated last week in San Francisco with 4 finalists, of which Radicle was one of them, and the winners were chosen there in conjunction with another bioinnovations conference there. So the first place company was a company called ME Energy, and they'll receive a $1 million investment in their technology. And then the second place is Radicle Technologies, and we're going to hear from Chris today, and his company will receive a $500,000 investment. So the challenge concept is just really a very different way for us to find and vet new uses for corn technologies. And in addition to that, partnering with the other corn states, Iowa Corn was the lead on this project. You know, that really lets us leverage our dollars in Kansas to go further and hopefully increase the likelihood of success, as these new technologies development is really expensive. And so, for example, you know, Kansas, of the $1.5 million, $87,000 of that is Kansas Corn's amount into that challenge. So we're really just a very small part of this very large project. The other part that makes, to me, this challenge unique and really good from my perspective is that Radicle put together this great team of experts that did the due diligence on these companies, on the 132 companies. And that's something we just don't have the capacity to do as Kansas Corn on our own. So, you know, when we invest those dollars into new uses, we want to make sure that we have the best chance of success for that. And part of that is putting the the right experts in place that are scientists and engineers and all of those things that know about these technologies in a way that we really can't do.
Neil, I want to go to you representing Radicle. Can you talk about what Radicle Growth does and how they're working with corn growers to find viable new uses for their products?
Sure thing. So let's start with Radicle. So first of all, Radicle is not radical as in way out there in the world, Radical. It's actually Radicle with an LE, which actually the radicle is the smallest, earliest emerging part of the root of a seedling. And like the root of a seedling that's just emerging, it needs a lot of nurturing, right? And so that's our approach in many ways with investing with small companies. We know that those companies need to be nurtured as well. And that's where we come in. So Radicle Growth is both an early stage, and I mean very early stage, like from idea, a little bit of money invested up to say Series A when there's commercial traction. We're an early stage as well as an innovation platform. And our core expertise derives from the unique combination of experiences of our partners. So Kirk Haney and I were both CEOs of startups. Kathy Shelton is a venture partner, and she and I were both CTOs of major ag companies, Corteva for me and FMC for Kathy. I don't think there's any other venture fund in the world that has that kind of combination of CEO and CTO experience. So all of us have focused also on the challenges farmers face as we develop products and innovate with companies. And so we're very farmer focused. We start with what's going to matter to the farmer, and we know nothing changes in agriculture unless the farmer is excited about that and makes that change happen. And ultimately, we're aware of the changing demands of the food system, but we're focused on the ag supply chain. So as you heard from Connie, we've developed a unique model of working to support strategic innovation needs of corporate and industry clients. And that's the Radicle Challenge, in which you heard we announced a particular innovation theme and a substantive equity award to attract applicants. However, unlike in our typical, what you call a blind fund of capital, where it's a pure financial investment that we're after, we're here not just on financial return, but also on supporting strategic innovation objectives of our partner and client. So we partner with U.S. corn growers to help identify innovative companies that could create new and durable demand for corn that would add value broadly to corn farming across the U.S. And, we were looking for companies that could create new products for the bioeconomy, like biofuels or bioplastics, and frankly, other bioproducts whose uses would displace petrochemical-derived products and build demand for corn. And of course, we're looking for companies whose innovations also might have improved the sustainability of corn production and specifically of corn production to make corn even a better low carbon and more competitive feedstock for the bioeconomy. So every company we look at has to be a good investment, but the priority really is on building corn demand for our client.
And Neil, one thing, when you got to the 4 finalists, you kind of did it or looked at it and had them come in like a Shark Tank style competition.
Yeah, one of the fun things is, and everyone loves Shark Tank, right? So, last Tuesday, associated with the biofuels conference out here in San Francisco, we had a pitch day. So the 4 finalists came and they did a fantastic job. Every one of the CEOs just gave a great presentation and gave great perspective on their technology. You could just see the talent that was in the room. And of course, we shepherd a lot of diligence information, as Connie said, for the judges that come together after months of work, the same way we would, and Chris could testify to this, grill any company in the diligence process that we might invest in. It isn't just like show up and give a pitch and we'll pick the best company. A lot goes into that final decision, but it's a really fun event.
Well, Chris, with Radicle Technologies and everything that you do, can you explain the specific project that you pitched and when it's commercialized, how it's going to provide new markets and opportunities for corn growers?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Radicle Technologies, we're trying to bring the farm to the future. So what we're doing overall broadly is that we're connecting the agricultural value chain into that of the high value industrial chemicals. So part of the reason that we have set up to do that is that there's a critical need to transition to low carbon chemicals at the lowest possible cost to society. And we imagined a future when we started 3 years ago that drop-in industrial chemicals would be produced from bio-based sugars rather than petroleum. And that then gets us around a lot of different reformulation costs. So what we're working on overall is the conversion of corn-based sugars through a lactic acid intermediate into the paints, coatings, adhesives, and superabsorbent polymer industries. So each of those industries currently is served by a compound called acrylics. And these are major chemicals. So there's about 7 million metric tons of these acrylics that are produced globally each year. And that goes into all of these aspects that we're using constantly. So what we're trying to do is convert that lactic acid. So that's a chemical that's fermented. It's produced by your body and mine. And there's quite a bit of that that is produced today, about 2 million metric tons of that chemical. And so we have a dehydration chemistry that allows us to go from that corn-based intermediate on into those acrylics. And we're able to do so at cost parity to today's petrochemical concept overall.
Connie, let me ask, as you look at both what Chris has done with Radicle Technologies and the ME Energy project as well, how are these projects going to help corn growers in Kansas and others expect what benefits they can get from these?
So, I think, Greg, the benefit really is simple. Projects like Radicle and ME Energy our focus is really to increase corn grind and drive long-term demand for corn, which ultimately is going to increase the corn price at the farm gate. We're getting really efficient as producers in growing corn. We're more water efficient. We utilize less inputs. We grow more per acre. And so you only have to really look at that corn carryout number to know that we have to find new uses. So, Kansas Corn, we're focused on increasing domestic consumption of corn and that domestic use of corn. We work a lot in international trade and exporting corn and corn co-products. But we're also charged with finding these new uses for corn. And so, if Radicle Technologies is successful, and an interesting side note for Radicle is that several years ago they were the recipient of the Consider Corn Challenge, which was a national corn growers event. So it takes a lot of years to develop new technologies. It's very risky, just as all new businesses are. And so our participation in this is again, by participating with others to invest in these companies ultimately is going to drive that demand for corn and for what we raise every day on our farms.
And Chris, I'm going to start with you on this. As we all know, technology continues to advance along. How much is the ability to unlock what that new technology is able to do?
Yeah, so we've been now scaling our technology. So we started the business in 2021, coming out of technology that was originally invented at the University of Minnesota by my co-founder, Professor Paul Dauenhauer. So we then moved into our laboratory facility in Chicago in October of 22. So we're more or less celebrating our second year of scaling out that technology. And what this technology allows is driving demand for about 3 million bushels of corn for every 40,000 metric tons of acrylic that would be generated on the back end of this process overall. And then we would need about 200 of those plants worldwide. So we have focused on the US initially, but it's actually a global business that we're having a look at. And we've been then scaling this technology in order to get out to that 40,000 metric ton sort of scale, where we have gone from milligrams and grams scale. And the funds from this Radicle Corn Value Chain Challenge then allow us to get out to kilogram scale manufacture, which then allows us to get samples at good scale out into those coatings and adhesives manufacturers to show that they really do drop in against today's petrochemical and continue de-risking that technology. So we're about another 2 years from being able to see those plants at large scale.
And Neil, same question, but in a different aspect. You are looking for these types of technologies to get them to further advance along, in this case, with the Corn Value Chain Challenge as well. So it's still the same thing, unlocking the technology, but it's just your ability to be able, you and your colleagues, to be able to define that and to look to see what kind of a future we would have with it.
Yeah, and we, as I said earlier, we through the challenge look at both how to help the company be successful, and we hope the company has a breadth of applications and opportunities. And you heard from Chris about the diverse ways that corn can be used effectively through acrylic acid right downstream. And we also look, of course, at the demand that it creates and working with the growers, right? So one of the things, and Connie mentioned this earlier, is that the challenge isn't just the domestic challenge. It is also a challenge that casts a wide net globally. And so, we had 41% of the applicants came ex-US, and 2 of the finalists were actually ex-US. Me Energy, the first place winner, is a German company. And one of the really great features then about the work we did with the corn growers was looking and seeing how can we attract a company with emerging technology and help it unlock its innovations into the U.S. market and help unlock additional value for the corn growers. So for one thing, when we did this, the selection of finalists, we looked at the potential demand created by the technology and the company. And in some cases, you'd have some pretty cool technology, but when you got into the details, maybe it only got 100 million bushels of new demand. And, you always start as an investor with wanting a really big outcome as what you're playing for. In the case of Me Energy, and I'll come back to what they do in a moment, if that's okay, Greg, but
yeah,
if they're successful, they could have an impact on 1 billion plus bushels demand, right? So we're talking a pretty substantive contribution for corn growers across the U.S. Now, Me Energy is sort of, maybe on the opposite side of the spectrum in terms of stage right now, where Lacroix is, right? Which is Lacroix's an early stage, technology is still being proven out. Me Energy focused on the need for off-grid charging. And as the world gets electrified and the grid gets challenged, and there are places in the world where you want electricity, but the grid isn't, capable, or it's not cost effective to try to find ways to bring the grid to a location, Me Energy developed these units that serve the off-grid charging need. And those units are driven by either M for methanol or E for ethanol, so hence the ME energy. And of course, in this case, the idea of leveraging corn-based ethanol through the Midwest is a really nice opportunity, right? So this is a very novel kind of approach, a very novel business model for the off-grid charging. And the nice thing here is that this is a company already in the market selling millions of dollars worth of their units in Europe. And now, with the relationship with the corn growers that we can help with, they can find an easier path to entry into the U.S. market. What's that first market entry going to look like? We think it's probably around urban centers where fleets, whether it's rental fleets or delivery fleets, like an Amazon, for example, where that can be the basis of charging. So again, from the challenge standpoint, we have kind of a diverse portfolio of finalists, and then 2 quite diverse opportunities from the standpoint of the 2 winners we had.
Chris, I want to go back to you real quick. With you, your Lacroix receiving a $500,000 investment prize, I don't expect you to unlock any secrets on this, But how big of an impact will that have on this specific project?
That's been one of the interesting parts about learning this side of the business. So before I got into running a startup, I spent 15 years working in large corporate for the Honeywell UOP organization, inventing and scaling out this type of technology. Of course, the R&D inventions are, of course, funded by business. And so essentially it comes as a percentage of the total dollars of revenue that come into the business overall. Well, on the startup side, one of the things that you're doing is having to finance that because we are still pre-revenue. Expect to have small amounts of revenue in the next year. However, for the most part, we're still pre-revenue, but need significant capital in order to continue to scale out the technology. And so, for example, this investment is more or less the entirety of the piece of equipment that we need in order to produce those chemicals at that 1 kilogram per day scale. So it's a huge impact on the business given the scale at which we run right now. And it's part of our overall seed round, which will then run 18 months worth of runway to allow us to continue de-risking and scaling out the tech.
Connie, one thing about this as well is that people go, I'm sure you've had this question, is to, well, when do we see the effects of this? This isn't a short-term thing. This is really long-term as to how it can benefit the industry.
It really is, Greg, long-term. But I think the value in participating in a challenge like this versus Kansas Corn doing it alone actually makes us go farther faster, right? Because we take our $87,000 and we put it with, corn farmers across the U.S. and make that $1.5 million. And, all of a sudden we can help companies like Lackrell or ME Energy have a big boost and go, because it's not just about the technology being successful. It's about merging them with the right money and the right people in business to make them to make that work. And so this is in it for the long game. But by doing how we're doing it, I think we will get faster results than if I just, as the new uses person at Corn, was out here looking for little projects to invest in.
If I can add one more comment
go ahead.
That would actually be that I think where things are at right now is what you saw from the genesis of the ethanol industry, 15 years ago, right? There was originally kind of one plant. No one had any idea whether it would become a significant market or not. And then it ramped up over the course of time. And now that's where 40% of U.S. corn goes, is to ethanol and DDGS production. And I think these two technologies, both ourselves, but then also ME Energy, which is leveraging the ethanol. This is the nascent portion of another type of business that might represent those same types of volumes.
One other thing, Connie, as well, don't want to forget that Chad Epler was with you in San Francisco as well. So that is a corn grower himself who is a part of this as well.
Yeah, Chad did travel to San Francisco with me. Chad just recently was appointed as the chair for the National Corn Growers Association, their New Uses and Research action team. I was also appointed to that team. And so I was really there kind of as an ancillary backup effect. It's really our corn producers, our corn farmers that are out there doing this work. He was joined by a producer from Iowa and a producer from Kentucky. The other states, their farmers are still in the field, weren't able to join us, but it's really our farmers that are out there doing the heavy lifting. We're there to support them and due diligence and help them along. But was very fortunate to have Chad there. He brings a unique perspective. It's always good for our producers to meet one-on-one with people like Chris and with people like Neil, because they get to talk to the people, literally on the ground doing that. And how do we interface our producers with technology like this to have the best benefit possible?
And Greg, if I can just add real quick, for it may be valuable for the farmers to chat with us, but I have to say for us, it's a great opportunity to be able to speak directly to farmers about what they see and what they need, and what they're willing to do, right, to farm better, to create more value for the economy. Through the process of the challenge, one of the things we did with the growers was to put together an investment thesis, right? What's the understanding of the market? What are the technology opportunities? And that sort of ultimately led us to the finalists and the winners. And in that process, we did interview a few farmers recommended by Connie and other groups. And again, I have to say that this is something I believe Radicle is very strongly committed to. I think more than some venture funds that we know, right? Really understanding the farmer mindset, the farmer economic situation, reality on the ground. Because as I said, there's lots of great ideas, but if they don't make the farmer's life easier or more profitable, they're not going to get adopted. And so we want to work very closely from the get-go with farmers and understanding the marketplace that they are managing.
It's a perfect lead into my next question, Neil. Where does this Radicle Corn Value Chain Challenge go from here?
Well, first of all, we have work to do with Chris and Alexander from the Energy to close the investments, right? So, because it isn't just a simple, here's a pocket of money to go do something, it's an investment. We've had discussions about the actual terms of that investment because ultimately Chris has an investment round and other funders, and we're a part of that, and we want to help drive that the right way. So we want to close those investments in the next month, 2, 3 ahead, and then work with Chris and work with Me Energy as board members or advisors, and helping also the connection with the corn growers. We know the investment's important, helping the company is important, but making sure that the partnership with the corn growers is also robust and real, right? And that opportunity is realized. So that's the sort of the near-term piece of this. Ultimately, for us at Radicle, we've learned a fair bit more about some of the key issues here. And I will say that, new uses are vital. But again, to me, making corn even a better feedstock for the bioeconomy is an opportunity that's still out there. And that certainly we are, as aware of as ever before on behalf of what will move the needle for corn.
Greg, Neil brings up a good point to that, why this challenge is a little different, and that it's bringing together people that have had solid experience in business, like Neil and the team at Radicle with the technology experts. And Chris just happens to have a great background in business as well with his previous work. But it's not just, here's a check, go do good work and report back to us. It's really a partnership with them to help move their company forward, because we know it takes experts in technology, which are the inventors of these technology. But when you have good support people helping you from a business standpoint, it really launches you that much further and faster, and helps. And we can take their experience at Radicle and building businesses and say, hey, I've been there, I've done that. You might want to make a different decision so you can bypass some mistakes, save money, and ultimately get to that commercialization stage faster.
And Chris, the conversations you've had with all the members of Radicle, be it obviously for the investment or anything else, how much of that has been a benefit to Lacro Technologies?
So having diligence questions asked is actually a valuable exercise because it teaches you a lot about where the holes in the business plan might actually come from. And knowing where the potential failure points in a business are helps you come up with strategies and alternative plans such that if a problem occurs, there's a ready-made solution to start going down the path of. So for example, in our business, there's always questions about economics because in today's world, acrylic is all about the price of oil, in that it comes through the propylene value chain currently. So it's oil refining, propylene recovery, and then portions of that get oxidized to acrylic acid. So the price swings in that market are all about oil swings. Well, in a new bio-based economy, that comes down to the price of sugar, right, which has to do with harvest, grain imports and exports around the world, a lot of different other factors. And so there's some different risk levels. And so trying to figure out how to best approach those, that's the kind of thing that the diligence gets into. That's where the business expertise from folks who have run businesses before, because going from a small business to a nascent, mid-sized business is a different exercise.
Neil, I'm also curious as well. 132 companies that were interested and participated in this. Did that exceed your expectations?
We always set a minimum target of 100 with these kinds of projects. And so it was 32% better than our minimum target. And I have to say, we were a little concerned maybe we wouldn't get as much international interest as we actually did. So that was satisfying. And this was a very focused area. So actually, we were quite satisfied with the interest level. No surprise, corn is a compelling opportunity for so many entrepreneurs, right? On ag and downstream uses. So it confirmed that level of interest in the startup world.
Greg, we haven't talked about this much, but it's not like those other 30 companies that we didn't invest in. We have all of the information for them. And so that's an opportunity for, as whether it's new uses funding from other sources, or as we look at new uses funding down the road and other states, corn states do the same, there's those technologies out there, because we had a lot of really good applicants for this challenge. So it's not like we're going to forget about those other 130. We have them tucked away. We'll be looking at those, and even as a collaborative corn state effort, kind of going through those and talking about them and what might be ways to help them down the road.
And this really is for any of you, be it corn, maize, however you want to call it. There is a worldwide interest in having corn and what to do and how corn can be used across the world too.
No question about that. We know that corn is just one of the most productive crops that we have across the planet. It's one of the top, couple of crops that's produced, and corn farmers with the input companies are continuing to make progress. And even in the U.S., the 1.5% roughly increase in yield every year translates into nearly 250 million bushels just in the U.S. alone. So corn growers will continue to produce, and I think globally we know there's an opportunity to put that corn to really great use for food, feed, and the bioeconomy.
Yeah, I just looked at the world population number. It's 8.2 billion, almost 8.2 billion people, and continuing to grow. So for as many uses as it has, Chris or Connie, that how important corn will be not only in the present, but in the future too.
I think corn continues to play a really important part as we both feed and fuel the world. We've just this year hit a high in ethanol exports, not just and that's not for our domestic use, but in us as the United States exporting ethanol to other countries, which makes the Me Energy so exciting, because it's not just what can happen in the U.S. for their technology, but how do we as corn farmers in Kansas support that technology with exports in the ethanol space. But because corn is so versatile and has so many applications, it'll continue to be just vitally important. And as producers, we have as I said before, we've just become very efficient, and we continue to invest in and look at new genetics and new production practices that will help us even produce more with less, making it a great sustainable crop.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, if I think back to when I was a kid, what amazes me is the efficiency. So, you used to be able to walk through a cornfield, kind of between the rows. Now they're planted close enough together that you can no longer walk. And that's actually what excites us as a business, is the access to a high value commodity that becomes the feedstock for us at what is the best economic price in the world.
All right. Well, folks, I really appreciate you coming on to give us a little insight on all this as well. Neil Gutterson, partner and CTO with Radicle, we appreciate you joining us today.
Pleasure.
And Dr. Chris Nicholas, president and co-founder of Radicle Technologies, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Always great to be on the show.
Connie Fisher, director of innovation and commercialization with Kansas Corn. As always, a pleasure, Connie. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Greg.
And this has been Ag Issues here on 580 WIBW. Stay with us. When we come back, we'll get an update on the news headlines, and we'll check the weather forecast. That comes up next.